Thank you, Neil. Well, I'd now like to welcome our distinguished panel to the stage to discuss why Western economic growth has not benefited all regions and all demographic groups equally, and to talk about the foundational principles that we need to rediscover if we're going to right that wrong. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rob Henderson, best-selling author of Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family and social class. Warren Mundine, I'm in the wrong order, I'll start with Alan Miller, co-founder and chair of the Together Association. Warren Mundine, an Australian Aboriginal leader and former national president of the Australian Labor Party. And Maurice Glassman, Labour peer, founder of the Blue Labour movement, and the only figure in the Labour Party to be invited to the second inauguration of Donald Trump last month. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that in a minute. So, Rob, starting with you, America is often viewed as the land of economic opportunity, but it didn't feel like that for you when you were growing up. And you've spoken about the kind of social luxury beliefs that make life very unstable for poorer communities. Are there any equivalent luxury beliefs when it comes to economics?
I mean, I think those two things, Miriam, are intertwined. So I define luxury beliefs as ideas and opinions that confer status on the elite while inflicting costs on the less fortunate. And look, one of the #1 predictors of economic productivity is education. And the #1 predictor of getting a bachelor's degree is being raised by 2 married parents. But of course, not all children are equal in their academic abilities. And so another factor that contributes to economic productivity is conscientiousness, trust, work ethic, respect for the law, integrity. And those things also come from having role models and strong family structures. And I'll just tell a brief anecdote here. I was at a Tesco a few weeks ago, and I see these 2 teenage boys, one white, one black, walking through the aisles, stuffing candy bars into their pockets. And there's a security guard who, by appearance and accent, was almost certainly an immigrant, and he was telling these 2 boys to knock it off and to leave the store. These 2 teenage boys respond by insulting him, laughing at him, and mocking him. And these teenage boys weren't behaving that way because the school system was bad or because of poverty. They were just behaving the way teenage boys behave when they have little oversight at home, no adult role models, and no strong norms and guardrails around them. And that too contributes to sort of the slow erosion of the economy. And so for me, the ultimate luxury belief, whether social or economic, is the family structure.
Thank you. Alan, it isn't just some regions or some demographic groups that have been left behind. We also see this huge disparity now between the big beasts, so the state and the big corporates, and smaller enterprises that are struggling. What values do we need to rediscover to level the playing field?
Well, thank you, Miriam. I think it's really important that the Greek notion of arieta and virtue as a living process infused with certain fundamental principles, Enlightenment principles that we should be standing on the shoulders of, freedom, truth, justice, toleration, but criticism. But at the core of it is sapere aude, dare to know and dare to say. Horace, the poet, the Roman poet, said it, but we know Immanuel Kant made it as the leitmotif of the Enlightenment. And it seems that across the board there's been a very people sentiment in society. There's nothing good we can do, we're all toxic, we're all mad, bad and dangerous. And at the Together Association, we believe very much in the spirit of J.D. Vance on Friday that free speech is at the heart of these things, and to interrogate the issues we're faced with and to do something about it, us, we the people, the demos, have to have our voice. So we encourage people up and down the country in regions, whether it's challenging things like net zero impositions, road closures, low traffic neighbourhoods, campaigning to get councillors and MPs or the government to change policy, or it's to do with go and sit in the corner, be quiet, don't speak, or put something over your face if it's not been proven, or any of those issues that some people can talk about Cicero very nicely, but still then tell us we have to do those things. We say, well, hold on a minute, that's not in the spirit of judgment of the public, of citizens. How can we challenge some of these egregious measures that are being imposed on us by technocrats who don't seem to value democracy, whether it's the state or big corporates or them doing it together, or people who are unelected technocrats. So the spirit at Together is to encourage the sense of daring to know and daring to say. On Friday we saw J.D. Vance say that. We've seen our Prime Minister actually threaten us more and more with speech, not just online safety acts, but Southport and the summer, and the sense that some people aren't allowed to say certain things. And perhaps in the spirit of standing on the shoulder of giants, whether it's William Tyndale, whether it's Peterloo, whether it's a sense that the public can really change things and make history together, I think that's the way we address regional imbalances, things that are unfair or impactful, or even just reflect on difficult things that we all here in a collegiate way might not agree on everything, but the core fundamental principles we do. And we encourage everyone to go out and do that and assert ourselves together as the public.
Thank you. Now, Warren, turning to you, Neil and John have spoken about the foundations of economic prosperity, but that doesn't mean that we need a one-size-fits-all model for our economy. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done with Aboriginal groups in Australia to help them engage more with the Australian economy?
Yeah, well, one of the things I base this on is Indigenous people have the same rights to economic participation as everyone. We are not museum pieces trapped in time. In my country, many Aboriginal people sit outside the real economy, dependent on government, trapped in welfare on traditional lands that are run as socialist enclaves and can't own their own homes or run or set up businesses and that. And they are sort of left over from the what we call the protection area. So the Aboriginal race laws that were around up until the late 60s, early 70s, where Aboriginal people were put under protection. It was done in good intentions because of the frontier and everything that was happening up to that period. And what happened then was in the late 60s, early 70s, when the laws were abolished, Aboriginal reserves and missions, so reserves were run by the government, missions were run by the churches. They turned those lands into Aboriginal land, self-determination type lands, and also that, and then of course legislation come in, which was English common law, which was the native title laws, which gave us back land that we owned, plus the legislative approach, which is land rights laws, which gave us also land back. A lot of people wouldn't understand that over 55% of Australia's land mass is actually owned by Aboriginal people, a massive amount. And look, my family for generations worked to buy their own home and get out of these trapped in these socialist enclaves and that. And it was, in fact, John Anderson, who's the former Deputy Prime Minister here, me and him our families have this relationship of 200 years together because they were squatters and colonialists that come up in our area. The economy needs to work for everyone, and for that everyone needs to be able to participate in it. Now, I was a young boy going through university, and there was the Kanak Liberation Front was going on in New Caledonia. There was the leader of that front, and he was a socialist, and it doesn't surprise people, he was a former Catholic priest. And he made the famous line which really resonated with me, which is, "I am not a museum piece. I am a man of flesh and blood." And what he was talking about, that people would, the way that these enclaves in Australia were set up was that we were to be kept in this pristine, pure state, which was to before capitalism, before all this other stuff was happening. It was this, and we were made dependent on governments. And I thought, well, if we're going to have 55% of the land mass of Australia, wouldn't you be able to use that as economic prosperity in that for us? So what I did was I wrote many columns about it. I wrote a book which can be bought at a very good bookstore at a very reasonable price. And then and also in regard to, I was picked up, and this was a very revolutionary thing. John Howard was the coalition Prime Minister, you know, the Conservatives. I was actually Vice President of the Australian Labor Party at the time. So this asking me to come work for him in regard to how do we get Indigenous prosperity and economic development happening in these communities was a bit of a shock. I remember saying to the Prime Minister, I said, "Mr Prime Minister, you realise I'm Vice President of the Labor Party." And he said, "To me, this is a bipartisan approach. We need to fix these issues." So I signed up and worked for him, and this started this journey about how do we put in place break down these socialist enclaves and start actually getting individual prosperity, individual economic development and that for people. And so we set up a number of things. One, we looked at because there was a law in regard to Aboriginal corporations, which was separate from the Corporations Act. I thought that was bizarre. We should have had one Corporations Act, but politically that wasn't going to go well. So what we did was we reformed the Aboriginal Corporations Act to actually reflect the Corporations Act, so there wasn't much difference between them. Then we started looking at how do we encourage home ownership on lands and that, so we twigged the land titles and that so people could buy their own homes. And also, if you want to invest in communities, like I remember some young Aboriginal tradies, they worked in the mines, they wanted to come back to their lands and set up businesses, electrical businesses and so on, but they couldn't because that was under the legislation. They couldn't do it, and they couldn't able to get warehouses and all that type of things to happen. So we changed those laws. But the big one that really made the big difference was in regard to what we called our Indigenous business and economic strategy, and that way we were able to set up private enterprises, commercial private enterprises. We kicked that off in 2015. It was a $6.7 million proposal in 2015. Today, through commercial contracts, through tendering, which on merit to contracting and that, it's worth now something like a $12.2 billion economy.
A very successful approach.
Yeah, 45,000 jobs.
Well, on the cross-party approach, I think that's a good time to bring Maurice in. And Maurice, we've been hearing about the principles of free exchange and how they're the foundation of our prosperity. But there is a difference between free exchange and being a radical free market libertarian, isn't there?
Yeah, so hi everybody, good to be back. It's really grown, I note. So the way I'll deal with that is I'll just ask the people here, how many of you think that God created the world? How many? Fantastic, I'm with you utterly. How many of you think he made a design flaw and should have privatized it first? Looks like I'm in the same relationship to you as I am with the Labour Party. Not too many takers. That's the issue, and Alan will deal with it later, but for me, the Enlightenment is where it all started to go wrong, and particularly, it's all right. If you applaud me, I get anxious. It's the story of my life, so you could take it easy. And the reason is Kant's whole idea of the rule of lawyers, that this was all going to be the rule of lawyers, and where's democracy in that? I mean, that's something we can discuss in a pub in North London at another time. But the whole thing is exactly this. So for me, God did create the world, and that can be summarized as human beings and nature. And what capitalism does when it's not adequately accountable is it desecrates creation by turning human beings and nature into a commodity. It's a sacred inheritance. And really, you're making me anxious again, really. Just boo, please, boo. And call me a fascist. I'm much more at ease with that. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Wow. Now I can relax at last. And that's the whole point with the disinheritance and the dispossession. It's really difficult for me when I'm in accord with you on all moral values, but it's really difficult for me when you don't see that there's been a dispossession of an inheritance. I mean, what is the meaning of the last 50 years, this terrible period that we've lived through and now? Oh, by the way, to all Americans, congratulations. At last, you found a king, and we can be... And now we can forget all that Republican stuff. We can have kingdoms aligned in order to preserve the sacred and to do what is right. And it's a wonderful feeling that we have this new alignment. But that's the whole issue, Miriam, with the faraway towns, is that all the wealth that they generated through their labour. So this is the big disagreement, really. I know you all love entrepreneurs, you think they're the generator of wealth. For me, it's the workers, the people who work every day, who go out every day, who with their hands. Do you remember until Black Lives Matter came along, we used to applaud them during COVID, the people who didn't earn their living on email, the people who went out and helped people bodily, physically, with their hands. And what happened was is that all that wealth was in the hands of capital, and what did capital do? The whole meaning of Thatcher, the whole meaning of Blair, is the transfer of that wealth to the Chinese Communist Party, who became...
Maurice, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm not cancelling you. We've just run out of time.
I'm just starting.
I know.
Good, good to see you.
Which pub in North London would you like us to meet you at, Lee? Which pub in North London would you like us to meet you at, Lee?
The closest to Tottenham Hotspur football.
Okay. Well, that's an open invitation. I'm going to thank my panel. Please give a round of applause. Rob, Alan, Warren and Maurice, thank you so much.